I'm Denise Griffitts, and this is your partner in Success Radio. Today's returning guest is Steve Cockram. He is a leadership expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Five Voices, the number five communication framework. And today we're talking about AI. As AI reshapes how we work, lead, parent, and build businesses, Steve helps people return to the human capabilities that technology cannot replace. And those are self-awareness, connection, courageous communication, and the ability to bring out the best in others. And today, this episode is sponsored by Bradley Roush. If your best clients aren't renewing or sending great referrals, it's a sign that your post-sale experience is not matching the promise that you made during the sale. And he partners with founder-led coaching and consulting businesses to turn more clients into renewals, referrals, and ascension revenue using simple post-sale systems instead of more and more ad spend. So when you're ready to make the clients you've already closed worth more, visit Bradley Roush, BradleyRausch.com. Now back to my guest, Steve Cockram. The last time he was here, we talked about understanding ourselves and others through the five voices. I love that. I have the book, The Five Voices Framework. And today, AI seems to be changing everything, honestly, overnight. I mean, I'll learn something yesterday. This is no joke. I feel like I'm back in college constantly. I'll look at something that I knew was just perfect yesterday, and then all of a sudden AI has said, no, okay, it's exhausting, but it's fascinating. So, Steve, why, and welcome back, why do you believe understanding human communication has become even more important now? And before, for listeners who may be meeting you for the first time, and I think we just chatted, this is your fourth time here, and thank you. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the work you do.
Denise, thank you. I don't think I've ever been invited back 4 times on a podcast, so I do feel very, very honored. I always think people think, well, who are you and what do you do? I think the most important thing is to say when it comes to things like communication and leadership, I always say the hardest place to lead is at home. So one of the things I'm most proud of is that Helen and I have just celebrated our 34th wedding anniversary. Helen and I are complete opposites in personality, and the fact we've managed to find a way to love each other through that is where so much of this learning has come from. We have 3 amazing daughters, and I feel very privileged in that place. I also work with some incredible leaders around the world and their teams, spend a lot of time helping people think through how they can make relationships more productive and ultimately work better. And I would say that most of the CEOs and founders I work with, they usually, the initial ask is, we've got problems with our team, or come and help us be more effective in how we navigate change. Invariably, though, Denise, the place where most of us struggle to lead most is at home. Just for every entrepreneur I know, it's so much easier sometimes to lead in our business than to lead in our home with our spouse and our kids. So I probably have that as a dual focus on what I do. I never tell leaders that when I start, but they almost always go, gosh, you're making sense of so many of the relational dynamics of my world. So interestingly, as AI is changing the landscape of work, mercifully for me, the ability to communicate and to actually build and establish long-term relationships, both with our clients, as I think you alluded to in your sponsor intro. How do we become the partners that people really want to work with long term? So that self-awareness, that others awareness, the ability to lead people, and particularly in places of stress. So the reality is change always brings stress. Many, many business models are being directly affected by the evolution of AI and the speed of AI. So leaders are having to lead under stress and pressure in a way that I haven't seen in previous stage of my career. So I hope that's an introduction. I'm an entrepreneur by nature, as you know. I empathize with just about all the challenges. Some of the businesses I own have been disrupted by AI, and a couple of them that I work with closely were in IT services, and again, that's being disrupted. So I hope I have at least useful things to share in relation to the topic we're looking at today.
Oh, you always do. You're one of my favorite people to chat with. I think I've shared that with you before. But you
I
said
think
some
you say it to most people, Denise, but
I
I
really don't.
receive it with generosity.
I do. I appreciate all of my guests, and I've interviewed, thousands of people over time. And I I mean, I've read their books, I've reviewed them, and I'm so grateful for them, but I have a few favorites. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, but it is what it is. And I just love chatting with you, but you said something just a few minutes ago about leadership at home. And honestly, I don't know how I think it's got to be difficult to be a leader at home or be part of a leadership at home because the emotions and the different
Mm.
people, and you're constantly in contact with them, and you can't just say, "All right, go to the boardroom now." You just can't do that. So, I would think that's
I,
that's a definite place to start.
I have you can tell me if we're going off topic, but I have a working theory, not that is scientifically proven, Denise, but I usually say the health of a marriage is usually inversely proportional to the financial success of the entrepreneur's business. So you have to think about that one for a minute, because what I observe happening, and forgive me, it's more men. It's not exclusively, but there's far more, particularly in America, where the men are the ones who are out doing the entrepreneuring, and usually they marry these incredible women who then literally give up the next 25 years of their life to raise the most incredible children and raise family and do all the things that are required to make the entrepreneur look good. And then they wonder why, when they come home and they begin to treat their spouse as an extension of their office and don't really understand why they're not throwing rose petals on the floor and that everything they say is, oh, that's amazing. And I think I always say to leaders, the hardest place to lead is at home. And if I ever interview anyone for a job, people always say to me, well, how do you do interviews, or what are you looking for? I say, well, if I had my perfect interview day, I would take somebody for a round of golf and then I'd go and have dinner with them and their family. And I reckon I know more about a person when I meet them in the context of their family with their spouse and their kids and extended family than I do any amount of resume in terms of character. So people don't always want to hear that one, but I would say I meet your spouse. I probably have the biggest indicator of the leader that you are really, because being a liberator, remember that language from before, calibrating high support and high challenge to create a culture, empowerment, and opportunity for the person we share life with as entrepreneurs at times. That's incredibly difficult to do because entrepreneurship is often all consuming. We always assume that everything we're doing is more important than anything else. And we have an excuse to avoid anything we don't really want to be at because entrepreneurship is 24/7, 365. And I personally have been convicted by that. So, as always, everything I shared, Denise, with everybody is not because I solved it or didn't find it difficult. It's more just observing as I get older. Where are the places where people often lose without realizing it? And last one on this one is I say, if you are a thinker as a leader, which many of you are, so rational, logical, analytical, objective, truth based, they become very good at compartmentalization. So they basically separate their home life and their work life, and they spend more time in the one that they find rewards them the most and they find most interesting. And they often become absentee leaders at home or with their children, even. And then you have the feelers. So that's the highly relational, um, values driven. They care, they empathize. And here's the thing is they find it incredibly difficult to feel that life is going well. Business can be going amazingly, but if the key covenant relationships of their life are not healthy and aligned, no amount of business success will make that. So if I put that in voices for you, if you happen to be a first voice pioneer or a guardian or a creative pioneer, if you're not careful, you will compartmentalize your life and focus on the areas you get rewarded and affirmation in. And if you are a feeler, so if you're a nurturer, a connector, or a creative connector, you will often be hugely successful at work and feel empty. And if it's not working because you live an integrated life, not a compartmentalized life, and if the key covenant relationships of your life are not working, no amount of business success will make you feel special. So there you go. That's an awful lot in one go, Denise, but you can pick the bones out of that. But I know that is true.
Well, and Steve, you describe five voices as a tool for self-awareness, and that's something that I think, and I don't have any data to support this, it's just me kind of watching because I'm always looking and curious about
Mm,
things, but it seems to me that people are not as self-aware as they need to be. In fact, they might be getting worse. I don't know if it's that we're just we're worried, we're scared. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now that just scare the bejeebers out of just about everybody at some level. We're swamped. We just
mm.
don't know, where's our head and where is our butt. We just don't know what's going on. And I think self-awareness takes a hit. What do you think?
I agree, and I think that the digital world, if you think about it, a lot of the social interaction, which was an integral part of childhood. I didn't grow up with iPads or iPhones or computers or games or all those sort of things to play. And if you think of the isolation and the effectively the lack of time people spend wasting time with people anymore, even having dinner around the table at the end of the day or whatever it might be, you have a lot of people who are socially less skilled, ironically, than they were, I think, 20 years ago. And in a sense, I'm agreeing with your point because I'm saying that emotional relational intelligence is probably more valuable now in the age of AI than even it was in the age of IQ. So in a sense, there was a time, and this don't get me going on schooling these days, but we're educating children for the world that was a lot of the time. Whereas if you think, what are the things that are going to make the biggest difference to help people be successful in the future? It is less and less how clever you are or in memorizing information. Because, we were talking before, whether it's Claude, OpenAI, or whatever you use, it's incredible, not only what they know, but also what they can do with it. The thing that AI doesn't replace, and that's why I would believe self awareness is the foundation of successful entrepreneurship, but also probably successful lives for our children, is the ability to understand themselves and how other people experience them. And ultimately, the ability to establish, maintain, and develop long term relationships in our lives, both personally and professionally, is the place usually where we find human flourishing, even in the midst of the stress and pressure of a world which is changing, as you said, at an alarming rate. So I think self awareness is the foundation of others' awareness. And ultimately, it's a skill set that's more valuable now than I think it's ever been, both personally and professionally.
Oh, I agree with you. And anybody who listens to me knows that, I'm a highly committed introvert. I really am. I can, if somebody knocks on my door, there's a sign out there that says, don't bother. Just don't. Who
I'm
does not?
impressed they can find your house, Denise, let alone knock on the door.
I actually had Google Maps blur my house. It's like, you don't need to find me. I'm fine. I take this very seriously, but people will say, and I've heard it a lot, well, Denise, you're such an introvert, but you have so many great friends and connections. I do.
Mm.
Refusing to open the door doesn't mean that I don't like and appreciate people and make those
What you'll
connections. And
find,
I think that's so important. Make the connection and then nurture those connections.
the thing people miss with extroverts and introverts, Denise, is because they don't really understand it. So introverts give depth to life. So you'll find that introverts have a smaller circle of really close, deep friendships because their desire is in a real friendship is to know and be known. So if I put you around a table with 4 or 5 of your friends that you know incredibly well, you will become very gregarious. And at times people go, well, you must be an extrovert.
Oh,
The
yeah, that
difference
happens
is
if
that,
I'm outside in the air.
there
People
you
would
go.
have no idea. When I get back home, it's like, "No talking. Don't knock on my door."
But if you think about it, what do we crave as human beings most? Ultimately, it's to be known. And
Mm,
our biggest fear is if we are known, will we be accepted? And I think that has been another place where, in a sense, the isolation of technology, if we're not careful, or the ability to project ourselves into social media and other things which are not authentically who we are, is part of that sense of, well, who am I really? And if people really knew the things I struggle with, or my fears, or my insecurities, or the things I give into, will I be rejected? And ultimately, every person really needs to have at least a few friends who know you and who still love you despite the fact they know you. And that's a lot of people don't have that. And I think loneliness has become an epidemic. I don't know what it's like. I know in England, COVID, where we locked ourselves away for nearly two
Uh,
years,
happened here
one
too.
one of the biggest things is, of course, once technology replaces relationships, I usually say, FaceTime without FaceTime doesn't work. And if you think about that, we were made for human interaction and to find meaning with each other. I have a friend who's a psychologist, and he said, Steve, uh, I had to stop doing back to back meetings in COVID because I just found myself getting so weary. And he explained to me something which I found fascinating. He said, Steve, when you see someone on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, you see them and your brain longs for connection. But ultimately, our brain also works out pretty quickly that seeing someone on a little box is not the same as the relational longing that is programmed into our DNA that we wish to be with each other. So whenever we do lots and lots of back-to-back Zoom meetings, our heart longs for real connectivity and we actually become tired and weary. So isn't that, it's fascinating to me. And so therefore I often will do at least once a day, I'll do a couple of phone calls where I get out and walk with the dog maybe. Not because I don't love the individual, but because actually when I can't see somebody, my heart doesn't long to be with them. And that was really helpful
Oh,
for me in relation to why sometimes we love being on Zoom or whatever it is, but somehow it doesn't feel the same. And I think that's part of the reason why, working from home versus working in an office, there's that sense in which we were created at a visceral DNA level for relational connection. And in a sense, the authentic version of that is being able to see and be with someone and be physically with them. So there you go. That was one that's helped change some of the patterns of how I avoid the temptations just to sit on a screen all day. Because even a phone call sometimes is better because I hear their voice and then I can use my imagination.
you're exactly right. And you spoke of COVID. I remember seeing this pop up constantly. We have Zoom fatigue, Zoom fatigue. It
Mm,
wore people out. And a lot of the reasons, you
mm.
just kind of touched on it. It doesn't really satisfy most souls. It doesn't bother me, but I don't do much of it. I'm very careful about how many Zoom calls I'm going to jump on. But it's pretty amazing to see how AI is changing the workplace at an incredible pace. So, from your perspective, what's the greatest human challenge that this is creating outside of some of the things that you just pointed out? And then I'm going to ask two questions at once and then get out of your way. How can understanding the five voices help a team navigate uncertainty, disagreement? And a team could be a team in your office, it could be your family, and rapid change without becoming divided. And I know that's a lot, but I'm going to mute myself so you can just tell me.
Yeah, I'll have a go at the first one. Or what have we lost? And then you can remind me again if I get there. Because the thing I wrote down as Denise when you said it is, I think one of the biggest challenges for all of us um, as people who run businesses or entrepreneurs, whatever it is not to lose our humanity in our joy almost of being able to leverage technology for scale, efficiency, and in theory, cost reduction. So I don't know yet how all of this will play out into the world of work in the future. I see a lot of warning signs that kind of we are cutting employment. A lot of the bigger companies are cutting percentages, which is leading to a greater desire almost to go. Everyone has to then compete, and people go, well, the most expensive thing is AI gives us the capacity to do more with less people. And I think that for me, the thing that's always challenged for me is to go, how do I remember that if I'm going to make cost reductions, that actually these are real people and there is a humanity and a compassion and an empathy and just an understanding that sometimes just because I could cut something doesn't necessarily mean that have to lose the fact that there is a cost to the person who's in that place. So that was my first impression. I watch as AI in its genius if it's not careful, we begin to see costs as people. And in a sense, for me, it's constantly understanding that if I'm making decisions or if I'm encouraging people how they make decisions, to remember that actually there is something special about human beings working together and the ability, particularly when we're connecting relationally with clients, working with clients, we will never remove the need for us to be human beings first. And I think that's incredibly difficult. It sounds like a platitude, but every person will know as they've tried to look at how do I be more efficient? How do I leverage AI for productivity gains or whatever it might be? I think we're going to find a very interesting moment when robotics, for example, catches up with the AI capability of now. And of course, over here in England, we're now talking about, well, some of the jobs that are most secure now are some of the ones probably less fashionable, where you actually can do things with your hands and make things and repair things and the artisans. Um, but I do wonder how we continue to keep our understanding that we are human beings first, not just units of production. And I see AI and the efficiencies that it can bring, challenging how do humans flourish in the age of AI. That I think is one of the biggest challenges that we still haven't really answered that exam question fully.
And I think you just said something very important. How do we flourish? And I'm going to go back to what you said, at the top of the show about when you are interviewing somebody, you go have dinner with their family and you can pretty
Mm.
well tell who they are, how they're going to show up. I think, and this is just me thinking out loud, which could get dangerous, as you know, when when AI is saying, or somebody at the top of the board level says, we've got to cut humans, we've got to get this under control. I'm wondering if they would sit down and have a potluck with these people and go, "Oh, maybe this is not a good idea." But they're cutting out the
Yeah.
human part is what you're saying, what I'm saying.
I mean, one of the companies I've worked with closest over the last 10 years is an IT services company, Denise. So, 11,000 employees around the world. In the middle of COVID, anyone who's a computer programmer, coder, software engineer, they were literally writing their own job descriptions and pay salary. I mean, the bigs, the metas, the Google, everyone was trying to hire software engineers.
Right.
This year, basically, when OpenAI and Claude released these incredible language models, at that point, effectively coding, writing code as a career ended. I mean, the disruption that that brings is huge. So the question is always to go, how do we as human beings understand that we've never had as disruptive a moment in human history with technology ever? When, I've done quite a lot of study of the Industrial Revolution, how that began. It happened much slower. There is always winners and losers, by the way, on an entrepreneurial frontier. We had 250 years of the industrial world. And over time, things get leveled out a little bit. Then a new innovation comes along and the entrepreneurs take it and run with it. But the AI revolution that we're going through at the moment is the fastest, most disruptive change I think there has ever been in human history. And we haven't even really got to the frontiers yet. But you think, you know, you throw in the geopolitics of going, is China, by making it open source and free, effectively going to really cause trouble to the American business model when you look at the valuations of 890 billion or whatever it is for OpenAI and Claude. So disruption, and then we come back to how do we remember that we are a human being first before we're a human doing? And I think one of the things that we have to try and balance is in the same way that the Luddites or those that feared the Industrial Revolution and kind of the change to the agrarian world that had been in communities by water for hundreds of years and the beginnings of urbanization and city and mass production, all the things came with it. There is always a tendency towards fear, and there is always a tendency towards trying to put your head in the sand or being violently opposed to the change. And I think the thing that I have to accept myself and everyone has to accept is we cannot disinvent this technology now. We actually have to learn with our own insecurities, our own wirings. I'll talk about voices in a moment. What does it mean for each of us to embrace the challenge of actually becoming someone who learns to use AI ourselves? And I think I often talk about building a bridge. how do you get from where we are now for each individual to what the next best thing looks like for them with it? And just knowing that if you don't, in many ways, stay in the river and the flow of this technological revolution, you'll become like an oxbow lake if you're not careful. Your business will become redundant. Your skills will become redundant. Now, it's really annoying that it's happened, in a place where, those of us who are still working or those of us who are still leading and helping others navigate this. But it also represents a chance, I believe, for us to reinvent the future, but also for those of us who are able to be, in many ways, a resource and a way of helping others navigate what I know is incredibly difficult. Entrepreneurs are wired for change. We quite like change. We quite like chaos at times, if we're really honest. And that's probably what gives us the opportunity to be able to, A, navigate it ourselves, but begin to use some of the knowledge and skills we have, help other people do that. Because in a sense, the traditional go and work for a big company, work for 40 years, get your pension and your share options, it's questionable how much of that will truly be around in the future. Um, because in a sense, we're all going to have, I think, a more diversified skills portfolio and probably as many strings to our bow as we possibly have. One of which I would argue is that relational intelligence and self-awareness that allows us to continue to invest in the relational networks and dynamics of our life.
And see, that makes sense, and I happen to love AI. I'm fascinated by it. Yeah, I'm really a nerd in stilettos. I am a nerd. I have been known to be standing over my stove making a roux for gumbo, and I can build an entire website in my head because I think in pictures. And
Yeah.
I've done that while I'm cooking before I even make it back to my desk to start jotting it down. But people like you, like me, were like, "Oh, what's next? We wanna know."
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it
And
scary? You betcha. It's scary. Every once in a while, Claude and I actually had a fight with Claude one night. I said, "You're ticking me off. You're giving me the same garbage code over and over again." And he apologized and then hung up on me, basically said, "I'll see you in the morning." Okay, because I was out of line and I knew it. Here's my point. Don't get nasty with AI. It remembers. Just don't do it.
I think it's one of those ones where every foundational voice has superpowers. But if you think 73% of the population's needs are either guardians or nurturers by first voice, they are present orientated people for whom sensors, if you speak Jungian typology, they're moving towards a future that is not known or not concrete, always creates fear. Because in a sense, why would I move to something I don't know is going to be better than where I am now? So
But
one of the key
but
things I
don't you
believe,
shouldn't you be curious about it? Shouldn't you go, I don't know anything about this. I'm listening to people say it's awful. I'm listening to people say it's wonderful. I need to go find out for myself.
and that would probably be the way you're wired. And I'm
Yeah, it is.
all
Yeah.
I'm telling you is 73% of the population are not wired that way at all. They are actually wired, thank the Lord. We've got 43% of nurturers who are the SFs. They are in the present with people, defending values, erring, so practical. In a sense, the future is almost, it's like, well, I've got enough things to worry about in the present with all the people I'm trying to care for. Why would I add another layer of complexity into something I'm not sure I understand or sounds dangerous and might hurt people? Then you've got your guardians, your sense of thinkers, who are incredibly rational, logical, but they need the empirical data of what's happening around them to go, well, do I understand the present so I can move to the future? So once you understand that building a bridge, there are certain people always in the entrepreneurial Wild West that have always done this. They see the opportunity, they go for that opportunity. There's usually huge opportunities of money to be made because it usually takes about 50 years for the kind of the regulations to begin to equalize things out. And over the next 50, 100 years, historically, we begin to think about how we level the playing field through legislation. But of course, all the entrepreneurs are pushing the future. They're not working in the governmental places who really still are struggling to work out, well, how do we tax money in a world where money moves at the speed of light and can be put anywhere in that process? So it's kind of I've spent time with all of those different personalities, helping them firstly understand why they should embrace AI, because each actually is a different strategy. Now you can call it manipulation, or you can call it, hopefully what I would call it, the calibration support challenge. Nurturers need to know that their embracing of AI is a means by which they're going to be helping the people they care most about to navigate the complexities of the future. So
And
nurturers will never do it for their own benefit. They will do it because they feel, if I don't do it, then the people that I feel responsible for, or the children, or the people I'm around, or the people I feel actually, I need to model for them. I need to learn enough to help them engage the future. So therefore, if my selfishness or my fear prevents other people from moving into the future, then that's my responsibility. Therefore, I'll change. Now, most people will never intuit that for 43% of the population, they won't embrace the challenge of AI because they're excited by it or because they think it's a brilliant idea. They'll do it for fear that the people they're responsible for are going to miss out if they don't help them navigate that change and build the bridge for them.
and what you just said a minute ago reminds me to ask you, how should parents prepare children for a working world that may look very different from the one that we entered or even 10 years ago? I mean, you
It,
cannot go anywhere without seeing children as young as 3 and 4 with an iPad or, some kind of tablet in their hands, which bothers me a lot, I'll be honest. But how do we prepare them?
I think there's two questions there. I mean, I honestly think the example of legislation catching up with technology, you look in Australia, we're about to do the same thing over here and effectively banning under 16s from social media. Because in
Right.
a sense, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, scrolling is totally addictive and it's not been helpful for them. I mean, you know, I think all parents use the iNanny occasionally, but I think there's got to be boundaries in those places. And I think most parents struggle with that. But we know preparing them for work, though, I think is probably one of the hardest. I've got a 15-year-old, very unexpected blessing in her old age. And Charlie's like, she's very bright. She works very, very hard and she doesn't know what she wants to do. And in a sense, not really sure, well, what does a world look like? When I left college, it was like, well, what job would you like to do? And here's some opportunities. And, by the way, if you start on your salary, you can probably buy a house and good to go. The world is very different. So the thing I would say to all of, I get asked a lot in schools as well. I say back to self-awareness. You have to know what your superpowers are. You have to know what you are gifted in and what you have a love of. And in a sense, be prepared earlier, I suspect, to recognize that there are different types of intelligence. I'm at a school in Atlanta, Denise, which you would love, where rather than forcing everyone into the same learning modules of IQ for up until the age of 18, they actually quantified 7 intelligences. I think things like creative intelligence, musical intelligence, sporting intelligence, caring intelligence, kind of like engineering intelligence, and then IQ as a classic kind of intellect intelligence. And they actually allowed the children to really develop the intelligences that they were naturally gifted to do. They had to do a
That's
core kind of curriculum.
brilliant. That's
And they were
brilliant.
doing that from the age of 11.
Right, and
And
I
I was
hated
like,
school, hated it,
oh,
because exactly what you just said, they corralled me into a group with other kids.
yeah.
I read a lot. I've been reading since I was 3. I was reading things that I had no idea what they meant, but they stuck with me, and you're gonna laugh at me. To this day, there are some words that I simply cannot pronounce because I've never heard them, but I've read them and I can spell them. But putting somebody like me who is intensely curious, who has read everything that the teacher hasn't read, and then tell me to, stay with the class, like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I didn't. It was pure misery for me and my teachers. Trust me, they didn't like me any more
Denise,
than I liked them.
I will guarantee, though, that there were certain teachers that you thought were competent and interesting, and they took the time to create an environment where they made it interesting for you to learn. I bet there was at least one in your school career that was different.
Choir, they let me sing,
There, there you go.
but
So if you
yeah,
think about it, we've got a lot of a lot of our people in education are actually people who are the sensors, the guardians and nurturers. because it's a more stable, secure job. And so we have this interesting, dichotomy between we're trying to prepare children for a world that the people who are teaching them have literally no experience of. And
Right.
so that's kind of one of those things where we're beginning to ask the question, what does education look like in a world where the jobs on the other end of it are not the same? And so you always end up with the schools that are probably on the cutting edge, maybe some of the private schools where they can think about this. But I would say a lot of them are now beginning to try. We do a lot of work in schools with things like voices and personalities and go, because if a child knows what their superpowers are, and they feel that they're affirmed and encouraged to develop those skills and to develop those competencies, their sense of self-worth, and usually then their success in what they do means that it's a self-fulfilling function, that they feel more secure, they feel more confident, they feel their value. If you only measure children using IQ, the reality is there are some people who are not particularly good at the academic stuff, but they may be brilliant at sport, or they may be brilliant as artists, or brilliant musicians, or brilliant engineers, or brilliant at building things. And I think AI is going to force us because, in a sense, it's IQ, it's disrupting more than anything else. You imagine exams now where my Megan had to do her law finals. Denise, they had to go back to making them write their exam answers by hand because they couldn't trust that people wouldn't use AI with their computers in the exam with an open book. Well, the absurdity of that is because how many times in their professional lives now are they not going to be using computers and AI? But it's almost like the way we measure so often is not actually linked to the world that's emerging. So, you know, um, here's the thing, we will get there eventually. I mean, I actually believe, the Brits, I know we're having a bit of a tough time at the moment, but we're actually a really entrepreneurial country. And one of the things about AI is, as you've just proved with your building your websites and other bits and pieces, the barriers to entry for entrepreneurship are virtually nil now. In the industrial age, you needed massive amounts of capital to be able to build factories and buy products and manufacture and deliver and all those things. So really there was a specific class that made an awful lot of money as the merchants, but you needed capital. Well, you'd be amazed. Kids in their bedrooms or together in a small group of people are producing multi-squillion dollar companies because AI is creating that entrepreneurial opportunity. And I've been working with a friend of mine who's really good at this, who loves to actually begin to think, how could we create a new wave of entrepreneurship using AI and digital pieces, actually working to reinvent the economy over here? So again, wherever there's a threat, there's an opportunity. My thing, Denise, is always just recognizing that certain personalities and certain wirings are far more predisposed to seeing and searching out the opportunity themselves, of which you're a good example, and I am. But the vast majority of people are not. And therefore, I think there's going to come, I'm hoping that there will be a renaissance almost of some of the more artistic, creative, other forms of intelligence that in a sense have kind of got lost under this thing of you have to all do maths, English, science, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, maybe some of the artisans and some of the creatives and some of the prophets and maybe we'll see more of that actually becoming something that is there. Because I would say, you can tell me whether you agree, but I look at what is happening at the moment. The industrial world, basically, by the time we got to, the 1980s, whatever, we had 250 years of it, there was a middle class that was actually a large proportion of our people in the UK. It wasn't they were extremely wealthy, but they were comfortable. They were, you know, they were doing well. Whether you were, teachers, medics, or whatever it may be, you were still doing well. In the world we're emerging in at the moment, I'm watching a far smaller percentage of people win, and a larger, much more significant majority of the middle class, the professional white collar jobs are the ones that are being disrupted. The actual people who can plumb and build things and put roofs on, they're still doing pretty well over here, but it's a real squeeze of the middle classes because in a sense, the people at the top will have less. So the question I said to my girls is, how can you use your superpowers if you want to be really mercenary about it to make sure that the people who maybe the top 5%, 10% of people who have an awful lot more wealth, what are some of the things that they will need and that they're prepared to pay for? Because in a sense, that's probably a much better way of thinking about how you work into the future. Now, you may say that's rather defeatist of me, but I'm always observing culture, observing trends and going, what is it that people with money pay for? And what is it they won't? Because in a sense, those things are probably going to be the jobs of the next 10, 20 years before we begin to equalize and maybe regulate and find a way to make things a bit fairer. But it's always going to be unfair at this stage of the entrepreneurial cycle if you can't embrace and take some of that entrepreneurial challenge yourself.
What I've been observing, and it's kind of goes back to what you said a little bit ago, I think trade schools in America at least are really
Mm,
becoming the wave of the future. So many people
mm,
go to Harvard, Yale, they go to these incredibly expensive schools. They've got enormous debt that they're probably
yeah,
not going to be paying off anytime soon, and they can't get a job. But if you can fix toilets, roof a house, you're gonna have a job, and you're
exactly.
probably going to be paid very well. I've had to have my air conditioner fixed twice in the last month. I
Yes,
cried, but I needed it. It wasn't something like, "Oh, I'll take care of that later." I live in the deep South. I would die. It's not an option to not have air conditioning. We need skilled trade people and
we
tradespeople,
do.
and I think we're finding that out pretty much across the Western world.
I mean, I'll give you an example in our house. Megan, my middle daughter, is 22 now. Very, very clever. You know, was head girl at her grammar school for select. Went to the University College London to read law. Okay. So that's one of the top places in the world to do it. She said to me at the end of her degree, Daddy, I just don't want to be a lawyer and I don't think AI is going to make it easy. And I said, well, what do you have a real passion for then, Max? And she said, um, I want to go to the Cordon Bleu Cookery School in London and train to be a patisserie chef.
Oh,
Now,
I
as you can
love that.
imagine, there's a deep swallow in the sense we go, well, how much have we already invested in this? But it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you've picked a good time in the Cockram economic finances. We'll pay it for you. You know, I've never seen her so happy, Denise. Um, she's a creative by first voice, and she's a perfectionist. You may relate to her.
A bit,
And
yeah.
what she found was with law, it could never be perfect. She could never do enough work for her to feel it was perfect, and therefore, it was really hard for her to turn her brain off at any point and really rest. So the creativity, these, you know, they're working 8 hours a day, you know, she says, but you know, Daddy, I get to be creative every day. And when I leave the kitchen, I leave it. And I don't, and I have other things that my brain can focus on at what I do. So here's the, you know, she's got 2 jobs at the moment and she's about to become a senior baker in doing somebody's maternity cover because there's always demand for that type of thing. Sadly, of her closest friends, none of the people who graduated from UCL Law 18 months ago have a training contract or a job. And these are some of the brightest kids in the classic white collar world, where if you look at it, professional services, which has really been the engine of the UK economy, instead of having a pyramid in our accounting, our law, our professional services, our consulting, they're looking at a diamond structure right now because they're going, we don't need lots and lots of young graduates. A, they're expensive. And the research they used to do as a way of making themselves useful, AI does it in a fraction of the cost. So there's another good example of going, you know, my other daughter, who is a, you know, marketing branding strategist, but you know, she's also doing, she's teaching piano. And she literally is like Mary Poppins. She's the kids just love her. And she's decided she's going to be the first piano teacher every child wants in Jarrett's Cross. And she can
Oh,
charge £45 an hour
right.
for teaching the affluent, the top 5%, who, what are they most committed to? The success of their children. And I said, look, you think of that is you can supplement what you do. But what I love about it is you've got multiple skills because I don't think any of us really know what jobs will look like into the future, all I say is diversify your skill sets, find things that people will actually pay for, and work on that self awareness, others awareness, relational intelligence. Because one thing's for sure, in the world of AI, we increasingly crave human connection. And I'm hoping that there will be a reconnection to some degree, that we begin to understand, well, what does it mean to be a society or be extended families at least that care for each other? Because a lot of people at the moment, in their fear, the tendency is to isolation and to deal with it yourselves, rather than ask the question is, well, how do we embrace this together? So I think we saw a little bit of in COVID where people kind of let their barriers down a little bit and kind of cared for those around them. Um, I'm hoping today, maybe I'm just an optimist, that we in the UK and probably in America can have a rekindling of our entrepreneurial creativity, and also a commitment to reconnection as human beings, and just a recognition that technology is good, but it isn't the answer to the deepest longings of the human soul and heart, whatever you want to call it. So maybe that's me just being optimistic, but I think for me is I always have to have a reason of why, and why can be optimistic in the midst of a concern, I guess, that there is a level of uncertainty and fear that we haven't seen, or I haven't seen in my lifetime.
You know, a lot of people, and those words are, I've been writing them down, uncertainty and fear. You don't have any promise at all that when you wake up and hit the floor running that, you might make it out of that bedroom door alive. You just don't know. We're fragile. We can die at
Mm.
any moment, literally any.
Mm.
So I tend, and this is just me being kind of pig-headed because that's my voice, pig-headed, but I just don't let myself wallow in fear or uncertainty. I just go do it. And if it didn't work this time, it might work the next time. Or, okay, never mind. Let me go try something different. I'm intensely curious. And I think a lot of people who are looking at AI and who are looking at different ways to create a business, build a business, feed their families, feed their creativity, which is hypercritical for me, you have to be curious and you have to be willing to break things.
Yeah, I
So,
agree 100% with you.
yeah.
Um, but I think it's also worth recognizing and being able to say, for some people, that's easier to embrace than others. And I think the key thing is you have to be moving forward, because in a sense, paralysis is what causes fear, causes paralysis. I don't know what to do, therefore I'm going to bury my head or do nothing. And what we're trying to say, I think, together is that's not an answer. But fundamentally, you need to be developing a diverse skill set to navigate the world that we're in now. And I think the other thing is to go every day, we're getting older, so we begin to think this way. I ask the question is to go, where are the opportunities today for me to be someone who adds to people's lives and to the people that I engage with day by day, um, talking to people, making that human connection, even with the person who serves you at the supermarket or at the bar or whatever it might be. Um, and learning almost to go, how do I be somebody who reinforces the sense of human connection and human meaning just in the way I engage with people every day? So that doesn't cost me anything, Denise. Now, I may have certain more self awareness of what's going on around me and the relational dynamics, a bit like the Matrix. But what I'm doing every day is thinking, not just how do I be a unit of production, but how do I be someone who's actually doing their bit to rebuild and to sustain society. So, back to where I started, which is to go, um, healthy families, healthy extended families. So it doesn't just have to be your biological kids and friends and neighbors, but extended families of always being the primary unit around which the most healthy societies have been built. And the more fractured and atomized our relational networks become, the more lonely we become, the more we lose that sense of connectedness and meaning. So I always make sure that around our world, there are people who don't have children, but in a sense, and for them, sometimes that's a sense of loss. But actually being part of an extended family means you always have access to be able to be connected in that way. And that's another piece for me that I'm particularly passionate about, and probably why, you know, Helen and I are both the product of stable generational family. And therefore, we have the ability to create stability and safety and provision and protection for others as well. And I think that's the other thing in fear. It's easy to retreat into your own smaller world to make sure we're all right. And I keep trying to challenge ourselves and other people to go,
Right.
how do you be people who gather others to you, maybe who don't have the resources or don't have the same fascination with AI? How do we be generous with what we've received? Because fear tends us to lead us to a scarcity mentality, which means we try and preserve and keep what we have. And kind of in some senses, we go inward rather than, I think, at the moment where actually those of us with excess capacity have to be outward focused and have to be others focused, even if it feels a little bit risky to do that. That's what I think will help us navigate together more than on our own some of the unique challenges that this current moment in history are bringing us.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that people, and you talked about the agrarian age, the industrial age, and we've been through different ages, and things have very definitely changed. There's no question about that. But I remember my grandparents, I mean, they were farmers. They were very good farmers. They
Mm.
loved what they did. But looking back, I don't recall them doing anything other than farming. I didn't see much creativity now that I look back, but they were just kind of stuck in their particular rut. And I think, and I don't know this, I just think that they really thought that was their road to hoe, and they didn't try anything different. They didn't try creativity. And when I say they didn't, my grandmother sewed and she made chicken noodle soup. And I mean, she was a wonderful woman. I loved her, but they never busted out of their lane, is my point. And I think for so many decades, years, that many people say, well, I can only do this one thing. That's just not true.
Mm. And this is where you and I are preaching to the choir, because you and I are wired that way. And I think the key is to go for those of us who do find embracing change and the curiosity of the future. How do we understand that not the vast majority of people don't feel that way, Denise? I keep saying it to you, 73% of people
I know.
find that very difficult. That's three quarters of people pretty much. So how do we, who maybe love that exploration of the future, how do we actually take the time to see how can we help others come on that journey? How can we actually um, create the opportunities for others to flourish and feel that sense that I can navigate this as well? So one of those is sometimes just encouraging people to go, like you said, if the aircon's broke, having somebody to fix your air conditioning right now. I mean, we are very luxurious here in the UK because obviously I'm an American in exile in Britain with a British passport. And 4 years ago, we put in air conditioning upstairs in the house. So the offices and the bedrooms all have aircon. Well, we've become very, very popular with our family, Denise. They're always staying here. But here's the difference. When it went wrong for one night, I called Christian, okay, he's the guy who's Ukrainian, okay, who basically fitted our system, has been amazing at being intensive. I think I've sent him at least six referrals of people because I said, here is somebody who was in our home for a couple of days. He is responsive, his work is outstanding, and he will be fair in how he charges you. And you think, I don't know whether Christian is as big enough an entrepreneur as I would be because I would have people working for me. I think he has about one other person. But I'm like going, here's somebody who's brilliant. Do you know he could probably work as much as he wanted to right now because in the UK, everybody wants air conditioning put in their house.
Oh, I
And
bet.
so back to your point of going, there are skills that actually require you to sometimes use more than just your intellectual brain, which I think will give a lot more people a chance to actually feel that I'm being productive in what I do, that work is part of who we are. So, if you're a gardener, by the way, in our part of the world, you can literally name your own price, way double the minimum wage. People who've got degrees in all kinds of things are struggling to earn more than, 30 grand a year.
Oh,
Pounds, that
ow.
is.
Yeah, but still, ouch.
Ouch. And because we've just not grown the way you have. Mississippi, the average wage is now higher in Mississippi than it is in the UK. which is we just haven't really embraced the fact um, we're no longer leading the industrial revolution, and we need a little dose of reality in how we do this. But I look at it and go, there are so many opportunities for people who are prepared to go, I could help with this particular skill or that. So we're back to trades, colleges and professionals. And I think the diversification of intelligence with self-awareness and that entrepreneurial spirit, those are the things which I would just keep encouraging children to ask, well, what could you do? I'm always asking my kids, what business are you going to build? How do I help you build it? And then for some of us who have resource, I always say, if there's anyone out there, the number of young people who come to me, can I talk to you about my idea? And I go, of course you can. Because in a sense, I have margin and I've been involved in enough successes and failures from an entrepreneurial perspective. Sadly, I think one of the ones I've been involved with looked amazing. AI's disrupted the whole thing. Deeply annoying, but the learning of it is profound. And, I sat with the CEO yesterday who's given with the team a huge amount of work. And I said, don't be afraid to call time a death, because opportunity cost means that you may keep it going for 8 more months. But I think we probably all know that the disruption of what AI is now doing means that's not going to make it. And I don't want you feeling guilty that somehow we haven't done those things. So that's for me, Denise, is to go, when you have extra capacity, when you have knowledge, expertise, capital, time, be somebody who is helping others navigate to the new world and be as curious and be as positive, and to effectively continue to always ask the question, how do I help others come on this journey who don't find it as easy as me? Now I feel like I'm preaching, but you've kind of got me on something I care about.
Well, and nodding my head, you should see my notebook. I've got 4 pages of scribbled notes. But going back to your air conditioning, I have to tell you, and I was sharing with you in the virtual green room at the top of the show, in June of this year, I shattered my shoulder. And I mean shattered it. I dislocated it and broke the arm in three different places. That week that happened, my air conditioner was down. It was
Mm.
just not moving at all. And I found somebody, we have a thing called the Nextdoor app, and he had great reviews. And I called him. God bless him. He showed up. He went, he drove 45 minutes to get parts for it. And then he sat with, because I was just melting into my couch. I actually wound up with, the only way I can describe it is diaper rash all over my entire body. I was
Oh, you
just,
poor thing.
I mean, I blistered because I was so hot and I couldn't really move. Getting into the shower was
Oh.
honestly not an option. You can about imagine that first week. So anyway, God bless him. He sat in here for about 20 minutes to make sure that air conditioner was working. He was not going to leave and, take my Venmo payment and say, hey, good luck to you. He did. So these are the people that you want to connect with. These are the people
Yeah.
that you want to, as you say, you share them. I'm telling people, you need air conditioning, call this guy. And I'm dead
Yeah.
serious about it.
That's fine. And I think that's the bit as well where, you know, um, the amount of people who get frustrated at the moment of they're applying for so many jobs that they just feel they get no reply at all.
Right.
And AI has meant that, trying to actually meet a human being for a job interview is incredibly difficult. And I say to a lot of the young people again, build your relational networks intentionally, because ultimately the opportunities will come through the people you know more than it will applying into a void where AI filters are looking for, needles in haystacks. And the ability to say everyone, so obviously people know people, but be very intentional as a young person. Who are the people your parents know? Who are the people in the community? How do you actually find ways to show people that you go, hey, could I come and shadow you for a week? I listened to a podcast this week with our new Prime Minister, and he is a breath of fresh air. Time will tell, Denise, whether economically we can pull this off, but at least I love his positivity. And the thing he said on the podcast, he said, for a lot of children who don't have parents who know people, it's really hard to get opportunities at the moment. And he literally has every week, he said, while he was the mayor of Greater Manchester, somebody came and did work shadowing with him. He said, because he was able to give a young person access to be in a room they'd never get into before, which was great for their resume. And he challenged all of us who maybe are in positions of influence and leadership. He said, have people with you when you can, give them an opportunity. And I was like, okay, that was a really practical challenge where I'm thinking, how do I make sure that actually I'm able to do things like that? Because in a sense, we'll all do that in our sense of scarcity and security. I will advance my children, but the question is, how do I reach out beyond what is just comfortable to me, be someone who is actually at the center of helping everyone navigate, or at least the people I can navigate the complexities and challenges of how do we get from where we are and we don't lose our humanity in our search for productivity, in efficiency in what we do, because ultimately we're human beings first and unit of production second. And I think that's we need to keep that at the forefront of even those as entrepreneurs. How do we keep making sure that we don't lose sight of what is really important?
I'm glad you said that. One of the things that I had written down to ask you was, how do we preserve our humanity when technology makes life faster, more automated, and honestly more isolated? So you got to it before I could. So thank you. Before I let you go, and we are running out of time, which I hate, but it happens. If listeners remember only one idea from this conversation, what do you hope they carry into the future of work and leadership?
Um, I think the first thing is to go, you have to know yourself and you have to know the superpowers that are linked to the way that you're made because everybody has different ones. So if you don't have, I may say voices is a great place to start, but fundamentally having a self-awareness helps you understand what you bring at your best to the world and what you're going to really enjoy doing, linking to that intelligence piece. I think that is for a lot of people fundamental, particularly for young people at the moment wondering what they do. And the other would be, because I can always usually have two, because you're kind, is this thing of saying, whatever your attitude, whether it's fear, excitement, curiosity, you have to embrace in some way your own AI journey. It doesn't need to be the most complicated thing in the world, but ultimately, this is a technology which is going to affect all of our lives. And by burying your head in the sand, you don't actually help anybody because the river will flow around you and you will become an oxbow lake. So that would be my other thing of going, there is an entrepreneurial opportunity for every one of us with AI, but we
There
have to actually
Yeah,
play and we have to get in the sandbox and do the things you've been doing. And it doesn't matter
yeah.
how old you are, how young you are, there is a lot of fun to be had. But I would say to people, if your default is to try and bury your head in the sand, that's not going to be a long-term solution. So they would be my two, hopefully encouraging, but also a little bit challenging. No action is actually an action when it comes to your engagement with AI.
And it's been around a lot longer than we know. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been aware of it for a while, but I came across, I think I was on YouTube. I was somewhere looking for something and pops up Steve Jobs. So it was a while back because
Yeah.
he's been deceased for quite a while. And
Yeah.
I may be incorrect in this because I heard it and I went, "Huh." He was being interviewed by somebody who was getting a little bit snippy with him, and he got snippy back. This was not a patient man. And the guy kept saying, "Well, you have acquired Siri and blah, blah, blah." And he kept saying to Steve Jobs, and I'm pretty sure I have this right, "Well, Siri is a search engine." And Steve finally snapped at him. He said, "It's AI." Now,
Mm.
how many years ago was that? And I bet you nobody knew what the heck he was talking about. So it's
I
been
mean,
around for a while. We cannot avoid it, is my point.
I think what happened this year, though, Denise, is to go with what the evolution and speed of ChatGPT and Claude has put the opportunity to use these tools into the hands of everybody in a way that just didn't exist before. And I think that's the big moment where, yes, there have been moments, but it's become mainstream. And the capability of this stuff is light years beyond, you know, what I think Steve Jobs was talking about in relation to Siri. We're now in a new world. And it's a bit like everybody has to learn how to play because it isn't going to go away now. You're curious, I'm
Right.
curious. Curiosity is the key. Doing nothing is a decision. That's the thing I think that people have to grasp.
That's paralysis by analysis.
It is.
Listen, you And I know this is our fourth interview. You're going to have to come back again in the new year. This is just too big of a conversation to drop here. So tell me you'll come back.
Denise, I always come back. I mean, we actually wrote another book in the meantime, but this was just felt like a better topic to talk about. So I'm honored always. I love our conversations, and I can't believe how time flies. But you are a joy and a good friend, and I feel and I will be praying that your injury heals soon, and that certainly your aircon lasts for a good few months left before the cool returns to where you are in Louisiana.